we have like 400 to 500 kids on a good day that are riding. We have community members that have joined. We have tons of volunteers that don't have kids in the school system or maybe at one point did, and just want to be part of riding with us. So it's become something that I think the community is really proud of. People reach out all the time wondering how they can start a bike bus. Is, oh, you must have infrastructure in your town that we just don't have in our town. And the fact of the matter is, no, we don't. I think Bike Bus is a tool to reimagine the status quo of American towns.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Jessica Tillyer with the MONTCLAIR Bike Bus in Montclair, New Jersey. Hey, before we get into this episode, I just want to pause to say thank you so much for tuning in. It really does mean so much to me. And also, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. It's easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org and click on the support tab at the top. Hey, let's get right to it with Jessica Tillyer. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jessica, I love giving my guests just an opportunity to introduce themselves. So who the heck is Jessica?
Well, thanks. So I'm a resident of Montclair, New Jersey, where we have a very active bike bus. My background is actually in theater and in the arts. And so that's kind of where I got my start. And then from there, I ended up in the world of design and then kind of moved into strategy. And so I've always taken a very experience-led and art approach to things. What I do now is I work with celebrities and I guess like change makers and people in the business world that really want to reimagine the status quo to help them come up with creative, different ideas that make the world a better place. So Bike Bus was a natural fit into that work that I do professionally.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And we see your t-shirt there, and we'll pop on over and take a look at this fun logo. I love this logo. You just look at this and you can't help but smile, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when we were thinking about the way that we wanted to almost brand the Montclair Bike Bus, and also we really see actually what we're doing with Montclair Bike Bus as being almost open source IP. We want anybody to be able to take what we're doing and make it their own. And that's already happening. People are, contact us almost every day from all over the world asking, hey, can we borrow what you did? And we say, yes, please. So we always share it. But really what we wanted to do with like this logo and with some of what we've done with the design is make it feel both grassroots and like a real thing. We didn't want it to feel too homespun, but we really did want it to be obviously something that's like bubbling up from the bottom versus coming from the top, because that's what's true about Bike Bus. So much of what the Bike Bus movement is all about is our streets aren't safe for kids. We've prioritized drivers, we've prioritized cars on the road. And what Bike Bus really seeks to do is create what I call social infrastructure so that kids can bike around safely. And the hope is that by creating this grassroots-led movement, it influences leaders of towns to prioritize all people and all different types of forms of transportation on the street.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to pull up the map here and give some context for the listeners and the viewers. For the listeners only, you can kind of like describe it and describe Montclair, New Jersey, in terms of its relative location to New York City and everything. So, yeah, there you are. You're not very far.
Yeah, there we are. So, yeah, we're super close to New York City. It's also worth noting we're close to Hoboken and Jersey City, which are two cities that don't get as much of a spotlight as New York, but actually are two of the safest cities in America to be a pedestrian or to be a cyclist or a biker. And yeah, so Montclair is a very interesting town in that it is has historically been a very diverse town in many different ways. There's socioeconomic diversity here. It's a very dense town, so New Jersey in general is actually one of has the one of the highest levels of population density, which makes transportation really interesting because it's completely ripe and apt for public transportation and for a network of bike transportation. And Montclair historically has always done things a little bit differently. So back in the 70s, they unzoned schools. So every single school in Montclair is a magnet school. So if I live, let's say, half a mile away from the nearest public school, that's not necessarily the school that my kid is going to go to. My kids go to a school that is 3 miles away from where we live. And that was a really awesome intentional thing to create this integration within the school system. And we feel really proud about that. Montclair is also a place that people enjoy aging in place. There's folks of all ages, so we have great age diversity. We have, I guess, because of our proximity to New York and because it's so easy to get on a plane and fly to Europe or to California from Montclair. New York is just 30 minutes away. We have a lot of people from all over the world and people that are just doing really, really interesting things. So there's a real intelligence to this town.
I'm glad you mentioned Jersey City and Hoboken as well to give some context because you're absolutely right. They're not getting enough press for just how amazingly safe they are. These are two cities that, the leadership of those cities have really committed to Vision Zero and doing
Yes.
what they can to improve upon. And I can't remember which, Hoboken or Jersey, but I think they're going on 7 years now without a
It's
fatality on their
Hoboken.
streets. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Hoboken.
Hoboken's amazing. Yeah.
It really is, and I'm noticing here too. So Montclair is a township, and I don't know the difference between a city and a township. You can describe that, but I do notice this little release here from today, I guess, published on December 10th, 2024. Montclair named among counties most desirable suburbs in America. And that's sort of like what you were describing. It sounds like a very high quality of life place.
I think it is. I think it really is a high quality of life place. I mean, that's part of the reason that we chose to live here. That said, I think the citizens have always have higher hopes for Montclair. And Hoboken and Jersey City are two shining examples. We can't we can't really compare a city of that size to a town like Montclair in terms of population and resources. But I think that's something that I'm just hearing more and more from residents in our town and in a post-pandemic world where millennials have kind of, older millennials with kids left the cities during the pandemic, moved to communities like Montclair, moved to suburban communities, and now are demanding more, are really demanding more. Montclair is actually really special and unusual too because it was designed before the advent of cars. So as you showed on the map, it's actually a very long, sort of narrow town, and there's a rail way that connects the entire town that goes to all of the cities that we just mentioned, and then also goes further into New Jersey. So there's this historic public transportation. There's also streets that are wide and were designed for people to be walking on and for horses. There's still a lot of those hooks for horses. So anybody that thinks that driving is the norm, it's actually not true. It's only been maybe the last 60 or 70 years that that's been the way that people have gotten around. anywhere, but especially when I'm looking at my own town and really thinking about the future of this town and hearing what citizens want. It is a place in which children, people of all ages really, can get around our town safely to do small things like go to the grocery store on a bike or walking and not be in fear of being hit by a car.
It's interesting too that you had mentioned, you channeled the community, and it sounds like this is an engaged community. And in fact, when I go to your website at the montclairbikebus.org, I see that when you describe it right there about who we are, you're like, yeah, we're Montclair parents and community supporters who want to make it, joyful, fun, and safe to bike to school together. And you're right. I mean, it's not a particularly big place. I mean, it's only like 6.5 square miles. So it's a fairly compact location. And then here's the list of the schools that you have the routes on. What's the origin story? How did this come about? I mean, obviously walking school buses have been a thing for a long time. I've profiled some in the New York City area. And but what's the origin story for Montclair Bike Bus? How did this really come about and get the ball rolling? And while you're talking about that, I may go through some photos and maybe a few videos too.
Please. Yeah, please, please. Yeah, it'd be great to share some of those videos. So it was truly kismet. I always say, this was meant to happen. So there was a group of parents, none of us knew each other. All of our kids went to different schools, and we all had been hearing about, and we were all I don't want to say avid cyclists. We were all just people that like to bike ride,
There you
we
go.
were all
Yeah.
yeah, so we were all people that loved to bike ride and wanted to do that with our children safely to school. I know for me, I have ridden bikes my whole life. There's videos that my parents have taken of me on a bike before I knew how to walk, and that's just always how it's been. When I lived in New York City for years, and I was biking everywhere. As soon as I had kids, then they were the appropriate age to put on a bike. We put them on bikes. And then when I moved to Montclair, for the first time in my life as somebody that loves to bike everywhere, I felt kind of lonely because I was biking by myself to school. And I just didn't see kind of what you see on screen here of, this community of other people that wanted to ride. So I was coming from that place, and it turned out that there was actually a lot of people that were also coming from that place that really wanted this type of community, that wanted people to bike with. And the magical thing is, because of what I explained earlier about Montclair being an unzoned town, we all had our kids going to different schools. So we all got sort of introduced through, I guess, just the small bike world that exists out here. And we were emailing for a while. And then at one point, one of us said, okay, enough emails. Let's get on a Zoom and let's talk about how we're going to make this happen. So we had this original group of, I think it was maybe 7 or 8 parents who all wanted to create a bike bus. I think some of the examples we had seen is in Barcelona, there was all these studies and research coming out. And then, of course, my dear friend now, Sam Balto, seeing his videos and just seeing that this was really possible. So we started meeting every single Wednesday night at 8 p.m. It was religious. We all were there, and we would meet for 2 hours. And we, I think, felt committed from the very beginning of we didn't want to just create this for one of the schools. We wanted to create this for the whole town. And that's actually what's kind of different about Montclair Bike Bus. A lot of bike buses, it's one parent or one teacher at one school. But we really wanted to create a system. So we had the perfect team, that group of 8 parents. So we had one person that is an economist and knew how to make maps. Like he's a numbers guy. He could make all the maps to all the different schools. We had one person that actually this person here, Stephen, who's a social impact sort of COO of a whole bunch of different companies, and so he kind of took on this like project manager COO hat. We had another person that's a labor organizer, and he just like knew how to rally people. We had my background, which is in brand and marketing and culture change. So like I was just thinking about strategically, how do we get people to want to be a part of this? We had a digital designer. We had like basically all the skills that we needed, a journalist to like really make this thing not just one small thing, but I think from the very beginning, we're like, we want this to be huge. At least that's how I felt. And so what we did, and I think that this, for anybody that's listening that wants to start a bike bus, this is something that I highly recommend. Before we did the bike bus, we did this pre-launch event, which was, we called it a donut ride. Like, who doesn't love donuts? And it was just such an easy way to draw attention. And at that event, it wasn't a true bike bus. We started at one location and we rode our bikes to this great local donut shop. We had donuts for everybody. We gave out t-shirts, we gave out stickers, we had people sign up. At that point, we had created a WhatsApp and we started getting people into the WhatsApp. And that was like the perfect way to build our initial audience and who became the future of the bike bus. And then from there in, I guess, uh, that was in March. And then we officially launched in April. And
Wow.
we went to all the different schools. And at first it was like, so these are t-shirts. First, it was maybe like 5 or 6 kids going to each school.
I was just going
And
to
I,
ask that. So it
yeah,
started off modest, and
it
then
started off
it grew.
super modest. It
Yeah.
started off so modest, and I think I remember the initial numbers because we've kept track of the numbers. We have this graph. I mean, we're so like, it's kind of funny how professional we are about everything, but I think it is our backgrounds. We just want it to be a certain level of professional. We keep a graph, a week after week graph to look at growth. And like those first 2 weeks, we do the bike bus every Friday. And that also, I tell everybody, you have to pick when you're going to do it and really commit to it. Rain or shine, you're always going to be out there and people can depend on you being out there. And if they don't go, that's fine, but they feel FOMO because you're out there. Like you're still showing the videos and the pictures. But yeah, it started off super modest. So it started off with like maybe 5 or 6 people. It started off kind of looking like this, actually. And then over time, it grew and grew. And something actually that was really important to us and strategic was the t-shirts,
Mhm.
giving out the t-shirts. And on Fridays, kids would wear the t-shirts. And then other kids would say, "What's that?" And then the kid would explain it. And so what we started to hear from parents is their kids coming home saying like, "Hey, there's this thing happening called bike bus. I want to do bike bus."
Right.
And that actually, I don't know if you know about this, but recycling in the 80s, the way that they got families to recycle was going through kids. They gave kids this green bucket at school and they said, "Bring this home and tell your parents that recycling is important." And we basically took the same model of give it to the kids and make the kids ask the grown-ups for it. So now we have like 400 to 500 kids on a good day that are riding. We have community members that have joined. We have tons of volunteers that don't have kids in the school system or maybe at one point did and just want to be part of riding with us. So it's become something that I think the community is really proud of. You can see here we have these bike bus yard signs. On one side, it says, "We love the Montclair bike bus." And on the other side, it says, "Kids biking drive slowly." And that is like I mean, I've printed those twice. I've printed 500 of them twice. And it's the thing that is in everybody's yard. I was actually just talking to a real estate agent, and she said, oh, I always, when somebody's going to move to the community, I always point out the yard signs. I always
Right.
pull up the website because, to the point you made earlier, this is the type of stuff that people want in a town.
Yeah, and it's such a very, very good point. When we think of a place that's vibrant and has a high quality of life and people want to live there, and I love the double entendre of my name, Active Towns, because I tell people that, yeah, I mean, these are places that embrace physical activity and encourage people to live a healthier lifestyle. It means that we have the ability to get to our meaningful destinations by walking and biking and parks are plentiful. You can get to a park within a 5 to 10 minute walk, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, there's those activity assets. But the double entendre part of it is that when you have a city that embraces, a community that embraces active mobility and an active lifestyles, they also become an engaged populace. So it's active in
That's
that
right.
sense too. It's like that. Oh yeah, I mean, because it's so true. Because when we get out of our hermetically sealed coat of cars and engage with our environment, it's hard not to become active within your community and engaged within your community and want to see
So
it
true.
become a better, more meaningful and really just beloved place for everyone, all ages, all abilities. So I love the point that you made about making sure that the bike bus is consistent. It's every Friday. You can count on it. We're going to be doing it. The follow-up question that I have for Sam and for some of the other folks that I've interviewed from around the globe, because I've had Jordi on from Barcelona as well, is talking about the fact that one of our biggest challenges in our societies is that our built environment should be welcoming to all ages and abilities, 24/7, 365 days of the year. Do you get the sense that this is helping with that changing of awareness and framing so that you can kind of lean in towards what's happening in Hoboken and what's happening in Jersey City, of making it safe and inviting for all ages and abilities to get to their meaningful destinations every day?
100% yes. Yeah. So I can tell you a story of, there's so many stories I've heard of the type of transformation that I want to see. One of those stories is, there is a parent that I met at an event that was happening at Montclair Public Library. They were screening a documentary about streets and street violence and how to create safer streets.
Right.
And, there was a community panel afterwards, and everybody was kind of sharing their thoughts. And this woman said, I would never, ever bike in Montclair. It's just not safe. And I'm so scared driving too, because I'm so scared I'm going to hit somebody. One small thing I'll say is that Essex County, where Montclair is actually the seventh most fatal county in America to be a pedestrian or a biker. So her fear is actually quite real.
Right.
So she said that. And that motivated me. Hearing her say that motivated me because I felt like I wanted to create a difference for people like her.
And this is a great image right here. This little video clip, I think, is a good point to that. This is what I call the active mobility SUV.
Oh, no, I always tell people it's my second car, and honestly, I can fit more groceries on my cargo bike than I can in the backseat of my car.
Yeah.
It's just like it's one yes, it's an active transportation SUV, absolutely. I fit three kids on that bike too. I mean, it's tight, but I fit three kids. So yeah, so this woman that I met at this event who said, I will never ride my bike. I would never let my kids ride my bike. I actually followed up with her, and I personally invited her to the donut ride. And I said, listen, it's going to be a safe event. You're going to be in a group of people. I promise you, we'll keep you safe, and I'll just show you what's possible. So she came. And at the end, she said, I had the best time. That was so much fun. And I said, well, we're starting the bike bus soon, and I hope that you'll join. So she did. And her daughter and her husband fell in love with the bike bus. Like every week now, they are 100% our MVPs. Like they're out there every single Friday, on the coldest days. That it was really, really cold last week, and they were out there. And then one day I saw her riding her bike by herself. And this was a person that 3 months ago said that she would never ride a bike in Montclair, that it wasn't safe. And then next time I saw her, I said, hey, I saw you riding your bike recently. And she said, oh, I ride my bike everywhere now. I just had
Wow.
to get over the hurdle. I had to feel the sense of people cared about my safety. And what you all have created is this sense of protection and safety, even if it's not all there. And I mean, part of an active town is more people walking and biking. Like, study after study shows the more people that are biking, actually, the safer it is for everybody, including people driving cars. So that to me, those are the stories I love to hear. Another story that was incredible recently is there's a mom that I know that doesn't have a car. She doesn't have a driver's license. She doesn't know how to drive. So she can get to where she can walk, or, if somebody can give her a ride, she'll join them. But she said to me, listen, I don't have a bike, but I would love a bike. And if I had a bike, I would join the bike bus. And through our bike bus community, we were able to find her a bike that had one of those things. It's called a ride along. So a kid can be on the back. And she got that. We found a bike for her older daughter. They joined the bike bus. They're also MVPs now. Like they come all the time. And then I saw her recently, and I said, hey, how's it going with the bike? And she said, I've taken my son, she has like a 3-year-old son, to the library every week. I had never taken him to the library because she didn't have a way to get there. But now that she has this bike, she can. So I think, to me, that those are the stories that I love to hear. And as a woman that's, always loved to ride my bike, rode my bike in like 2008 when it was honestly mostly still men, because it was unsafe. And I think for good reasons, mothers especially are super concerned about the safety of their children. And if marketers are telling them the safest thing you can do is buy this big SUV for your child, I understand that. I have empathy for that. But what I want to show more and more mothers, because it is mothers that are making decisions, and for the most part for their families, is just try out biking. And then if they try out biking, then they start to look around and think, actually, there's ways that our town should be keeping me safe and my children safe. And then they end up going to town council meetings, and then they end up maybe running for mayor. And so I think like that to me, that's the progression that I really, really want to see, is like what starts in bike bus is almost, from like a marketing perspective, it's a funnel that gets more and more people to be exactly what you're saying, like active members of their towns and active citizens.
Exactly. And I'm lingering on this particular photo because I want to dive a little bit deeper into your network of volunteers and the people who are engaged to make this happen every Friday. So take it away. Tell us more about this particular image.
So this is the woman that is pointing at the person in the vest. That is the principal at one of our schools. And then the person in the vest is one of our volunteers. I love that image because it does just show the sort of mutual support that you need. So with each bike bus, we have clarified some different roles. So we have a captain and we have a caboose. So somebody in the front, somebody in the back. And then we have what we call sheepdogs. And it's funny because we just made this up. And now we see all these bike buses using this terminology, and we're like, great, call them
Hey,
sheepdogs.
I got to jump in and say I applaud this move. This is fantastic. I grew up on a sheep ranch, and so there you go.
Okay, so you know the power of a sheepdog.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So our sheepdogs are adults that ride on the outside of kids. So they're basically like a human barrier against traffic.
Right, right.
And then we have a few other roles. So we have people that we call sprinters. Those are basically our corkers that go way ahead and will block intersections. So all of those roles are very important on our bike bus. And it's all volunteers, it's all people that just want to be part of Bike Bus and want to do this. We kind of trade off some of those roles, but definitely our captains of each bike bus remain consistent week after week. And then the other important part is I really believe, especially with bike stuff, because the system is kind of set up against us, you can't ask for permission. This was actually, I'll just jump in and say this video we created as almost like a launch video. So this was after we did the donut ride, we created this video just to show people. And I think this is what's so important about like what Sam does. Like the videos help show people what it is because trying to tell people about a bike bus, it doesn't really work. And this got so many people. I mean, we got, hundreds of shares of this video, people saying like to their communities, let's do this. We've worked really, really hard with the principals and the PTA to build trust. We didn't start by asking permission from them to do this because I think the natural answer would just be no,
Right.
or what's the liability? Which I think it's so interesting that the question of liability comes up all the time with Bike Bus. And, if I pick up my friend's kid in my car, I'm not asking them to sign a waiver that says I'm allowed to drive them,
Right.
so
Yeah.
why should it be any different on a bike? But we've had huge success with principals and with the PTA in understanding why this matters. And I think, seeing what kids are like when they walk into school after Bike Bus, seeing how calm and alert and happy and joyful they are. And there's also studies that show that, if kids get activity before they head into school, walking, biking, whatever, they actually end up performing better throughout the school day. So people that understand that, educators that understand that, are natural advocates and allies and just really get the power of Bike Bus.
Yeah. I want to pull up this particular visual here. I mean, I think this visual, from what I've been able to tell from the photos and some of the videos, and folks in the listening only audience, you might want to pop in and just kind of scroll through this video just to be able to get an idea as to what this environment's like. But I wanted to point out that, based on what you said earlier, is that, the township, was established back in the 1800s. It was established before the advent of the automobile. The scale is such that really the environment was transformed to accommodate cars. And now, we have a situation where y'all are taking over the streets, taking them, bringing them back, taking control of them once again. My mug is, streets are for people. And I point out that, streets have been around for thousands of years. The automobile just started to be the interloper about 120 years ago. And so the point I want to make is that everything that we have seen here is not about bicycling infrastructure. You're essentially rolling down the streets and you're taking over these quiet residential streets. I'm sure when you think of your route of how you're going to be doing it, you're working on a route that delivers the kids to the school safely, as safe as possible, and then crossing any major streets and roads that need to be dealt with if necessary. But I think the reason I like to emphasize this is that oftentimes when we look at our quote unquote bike map of a city and we're like, well, yeah, I can't get there from here. I can't get to where I need to get to. And it's unfortunate that many of the quiet residential streets that may have low volumes and low speeds for the most part are left untapped. And I emphasize this because, when we look to the Dutch and their, amazing rates of cycling, and the Dutch have been very, very interesting, responding on my channel to Bike Bus, because they're like, what? This is what happens every day to school. But and it's not a fair comparison, but what is a fair comparison is that 60 to 70% of their entire cycle network is shared space or shared streets, just like what we see here. And again, the key is what they do really, really well is traffic calming, is they make sure that those shared streets are truly low volume and low speed.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of communities and individuals who might be tuning into this might be wondering, we don't have bicycle infrastructure. We don't have, the ability to do this. Can you address that? Because I think it gets to the story that you were talking about with your first example of a success story of her being able to understand, oh, wow, I can do this. Talk a little bit about the fact that you are sharing space. You're sharing these quiet, residential, low volume, low speed streets.
Yeah. So I think something that I hear a lot, because people reach out all the time wondering how they can start a bike bus, is, oh, you must have infrastructure in your town that we just don't have in our town. And the fact of the matter is, no, we don't. I think bike bus is a tool to reimagine the status quo of American towns.
Right.
And when you're reimagining the status quo of something, you can't start with the barriers. You have to start with the dream.
Right.
And that is really what we're trying to do, is starting with the dream. So I guess from sort of logical place, what we did is we biked on all of the streets and really examined which streets had the lowest volume and were the best set up to do bike bus. There is some extremely busy, scary streets that we cross. We go, looking at this map, you see that it's the sort of long rectangle. We go from the top of the rectangle basically down to the bottom of the rectangle. We have, and from the bottom of the rectangle to the top, we have routes that are going in all directions. So we really needed to do a lot of prototyping before we actually created the routes. Something else I'll say is, because Montclair was designed before the advent of the automobile, there are these, they're called alleys in our town. So there's
Right.
these little pedestrian walking paths that connect different streets that might be almost like boulevard style streets.
Right.
And those are absolutely amazing. So there's a way to get through town on lots of those alleyways that it's not really what you would consider an alleyway. It's quite beautiful, actually. And we utilize some of those on the bike bus too. So something that I've loved hearing from kids on the bike bus is they're actually getting to know the town so much better, because they're not taking this direct route from point A to point B. They're taking the safest route from point A to point B. And that means going through these beautiful parks we have and going through the alleyways, and really, I think, feeling liberated to understand their town in a way that they didn't in the backseat of their car just looking out the window.
That's a really, really good point. And in fact, studies do show that for children who arrive to school in the back of their car versus arriving to school either walking or biking with or without a parent or an adult, those kids actually know their city much better. They have a mental map. They can actually recreate and draw what their city is and what their route to school is like. And they can be really creative. And so there's a lot of really good research and a lot of good studies out there that, look at that that impact of being able to get kids out there. What's interesting too, when we zoom in on this map, I have the Google bicycle map overlay, put in here, and so the only thing that's showing up as bicycle infrastructure is really the pathways in the parks and a couple of other little trails over in here, and then the dotted line is Google's attempt to say, well, that's a relatively quiet street that would be a preferred bicycle route kind of thing. And to my point, and to what your point is that for the most part, many, if not most, of these quiet residential streets should probably all have dotted green lines on them, because they're inherently, for the most part, going to be a comfortable shared space environment, so long as, again, volumes are down and speeds are down. And to your point from earlier, is the more people that we have out there riding on a regular basis, it becomes safer for everyone. And you pointed it out. You said it. You said it becomes safer for everyone, including people driving.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, some of those streets, there's actually some streets that I didn't feel comfortable biking on until Bike Bus. So we have this street, Park Street, that's actually one of the ones that you just zoomed in on. And it seems like it might be quiet, but because it's such a smooth, long street, people go pretty fast on it. But what has happened is with Bike Bus, it's actually changed driver behavior in Montclair, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that anecdotally, and the other thing that we were actually able to do, again, to the point that you made earlier of when you have an active town, you develop active citizens, is our Bike Bus folks have started showing up to town council meetings. And we did this huge push to lower speed limits in our town. We had most of the townwide speed limits were 35 miles per hour, which, if even a small car is going that speed, you're more likely to die at that speed than
And
25
that's
miles
just
per hour.
insane when you talk about a city that was developed prior to the automobile. 35 miles per hour is just ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, and I spoke earlier. So we were actually able to lower that to 25 miles per hour, and then to create a pretty decent sized school zone, where the speed limit is 20 miles per hour. But that took the push of parents going to town council meetings week after week. So pretty much everybody that you see in this picture, we had that number of people going to town council meetings saying, this speed is too fast. And for my safety and for my children's safety, you have to change it.
Yeah. Now, you just mentioned something I want to follow up on. You mentioned school zones and really looking at bringing those speeds down to 20 miles per hour, because 20 really is plenty. There's no reason why anybody should be driving more than 20. And really, it's good that you guys got the default down to 25. That extra 5 miles per hour slower is really essential and really, really critical. So I'm glad the school zones have been able to get down to 20. I'm sure you know about the school streets movement that's also happening. Both the bike bus and the school streets movement sort of popped up in the aftermath of the pandemic, which is another thing, another reset. Even on my shared streets here, I don't have sidewalks in my neighborhood either here in Austin, Texas, and so what we saw was just people taking over the street just to get some walking in, during the lockdown, and the number of cars decreased and the amount of speed, decreased. And we never gave the streets back. I walk around with my Streets Are For People t-shirt in the middle of the street and wave to my neighbors and say hi. And that's that reinforcement to driver behavior. You mentioned it earlier, is because you're consistently out there, y'all are out there, as people, taking control, taking the streets back for you. You're able to do that. Talk a little bit about that potential, though, of maybe catching fire with that other movement that's happening, which is school streets, which is taking some transformations to make those streets around schools safe zones. I had an opportunity to visit some of them in Paris this summer and videoed, permanent infrastructure that, basically expanded the school property and park property and making it a no car zone.
Yeah. I'm such a proponent of school streets, just from even a emissions point of view. There's incredible studies that show the amount of emissions that are outside of schools is like a child being exposed to, like, 20 people smoking a cigarette right in their face. It's just horrible. And then from like a safety perspective too, I think it's so important. Something that I think is really special about school streets, or about some of what you see happening in Barcelona, is there is this art and activity lens to it. And I think, to me, those are two things that are so healing and are so missing from the fabric of most American cities and towns. When I always like show the example of Disneyland. Americans love Disneyland. Why? Because they get to walk everywhere. Like, why is it that a family that lives in the suburbs that mostly drives all of a sudden goes to Disneyland and is so happy to walk everywhere? It's because it's great infrastructure in Disneyland, and it's artistic, and it's like magical. And I think that is
Well,
what
that's the same
is.
thing we see. It's the same thing we see when people go to Europe.
Oh, 100%. Or to yeah, I mean, to like Tokyo or Seoul, or yeah, basically any city or town that is outside of North America. You get, where my mom lived. My mom lives actually in a small town in Mexico, and there's the plaza, and everybody just walks to the plaza, and all the kids are playing at night, and parents don't know where their kids are. And it's okay because their kids are just playing soccer. But there is just this sense of arts, community, activity all coming together. And that's actually, it's not rocket science. It's actually just deeply human, and that's what makes us human, is we want those things together. So to me, when I look at school streets, and when I look at sort of like those movements towards like active blocks, or just thinking differently about neighborhoods, what actually gets me super excited, living in, always kind of being a city dweller, and now living in what's considered to be, a town, what's kind of negatively considered to be suburbia, where everything is stagnant, is like, what an opportunity to reimagine what suburbia can be.
Right.
Like, getting school streets, getting streets that are maybe closed to traffic, maybe all the time, or maybe at least some days a week, rethinking parking mandates, like all of these things together, getting more arts. Something that I absolutely love is in Amsterdam, how there's those beautiful blocks that are basically all these large flower planters.
Right.
It wasn't like the town came along. It wasn't like the mayor came along and said, "Hey, let's have all these flower planters on the street." It was literally mothers moving the flower planters out of their homes to the street so that cars couldn't drive down and their children could safely play. And that's where I'm like, that's so beautiful, because it is about, it's this sort of like, mother led movement, which, mothers need to be more involved in these sort of active decisions. It is artistic and beautiful. It makes the town more beautiful. And it creates safety. So that's where I'm like, there's these things can really come together, and why I feel so strongly about just go for it. Don't ask for permission.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got your website back up, and we have the list of the schools on here. Are all of these elementary schools, or is there a mix of elementary and middle schools?
Yeah, so we started with just elementary schools, and then our elementary school kids started graduating and going to middle school. So this fall was our first year having middle schools, and I thought It's definitely a different beast, because for good reason, when the kids are in middle school, they're like, I've got this, back off. I don't need this adult leader. All of the adults be their caboose. And we've really figured out how to make that happen. And the other thing that's really interesting about middle school is it's been very student led. So it's basically the kids saying, like, hey, is there going to be a bike bus at my middle school? And we said, okay, of course, let's make it happen.
Right.
So yeah, so that's exciting. And then the other thing that I feel really excited about is just seeing this generation kind of go into high school too. So I think e-bikes are incredible for anybody. For somebody that just had a knee surgery, they can get on their e-bike a lot sooner than they can get on a regular road bike. And then for middle school or high school kids, that sort of freedom that we associate with a car, you absolutely have that with an e-bike. So I'm really, really hoping that, a kindergartner today that's riding on our bike bus, you know, 10 years from now or 12 years from now, they're on an e-bike with a pack of kids going to go see a movie or, whatever they're going to go do, and doing that on an e-bike versus a car.
Yeah, yeah. So going back to the school streets and that potential, that opportunity that exists there, do you get the sense that maybe one or two or many of these schools could be potential candidates for a school street sort of implementation?
Oh yeah, yeah. So there's one school here, Watchung, that actually already has a school street implementation. It's just during school hours. And then we've actually been working with principals and the PTA at other schools to look at increasing that school zone,
Right.
so that parents are parking farther away if they have to drop their kids off, and also prioritizing kids either on bikes or walking or in the bus, be able to get to school.
Yeah, because my assumption that you have, based on how you sort of set up the different schools here, is that there's a fair amount of what we would call school choice. Is that correct? Where parents don't necessarily have to have their kids go to the elementary school or the middle school that's closest to them. It sounds like there's a little bit of flexibility, and with that flexibility comes the likelihood of more parents feeling compelled to have to drive their kids to school. Am I catching that? Is that kind of the right setup?
Yes. So we have a busing system here in Montclair that serves probably 90% of the population. So if you live within a mile radius of school, then you have to walk or bike or I guess drive. But anybody that lives further away than a mile from their school, they can get bused,
Ah,
which is
okay.
great. Which is great. I've seen the videos of the car lines in most of America, and it's pretty insane. We spend close to, I think, like between $6 and $8 million on our busing system. So it's pretty expensive, but in terms of equity and integration, I think pretty much all people in Montclair feel like, of course we want to spend that money on public transportation. That said, there's some kids, and I hear this on bike bus, that they don't love taking the bus. There's like some bullying that happens on the bus, or they have a fear of taking the bus. And I actually think that bike bus provides this really nice sort of intermediate solution between getting driven and taking the bus that kids love, because all of the sort of dynamics that exist on the bus that sometimes don't feel great, they don't exist on bike bus, because you can't really focus on anything except bike riding, and having a good time. Like, this is such a typical day on bike bus. It feels more like a party than a commute. And that is actually another part of Bike Bus that I think is really inspiring, and I hope it inspires people as they think about being active citizens in their towns in more ways, because it is, again, reimagining the status quo of what is routine or what is mundane. So rather than just being like, I hate driving my kid to school, it's the worst part of my day, it sucks, it becomes like, wow, biking my kid to school is the most magical part of my day. It's the thing that I look forward to the most.
Well, and the kids look forward to it too.
Oh, yeah, the kids, yes. Like we hear that we have a WhatsApp group for each school, and we hear that a lot of like, I don't really want to do bike bus today, but my kids do. So we'll see you out there. And yeah, the kids absolutely love it and are willing to do anything to ride with us.
So, one of the things that I talk about a lot with the Active Towns channel is this concept of community transformations. And so, yes, we're looking at trying to transform the built environment. We want to create a situation where we feel like it's safe and inviting to get out there and do things, with the caveat that we know that, we can't just magically, wave a wand and, turn this into quote unquote the Netherlands. And then, as we mentioned earlier, is that, yeah, but the vast majority of the cycle network in the Netherlands is also shared space. So we have to be a little bit realistic on this. But one of the things that I love to talk about and really emphasize is that we're talking about creating a culture of activity, making it
Yes.
normal once again for people to walk and bike to meaningful destinations. To close us out, talk a little bit about how Bike Bus is sort of changing that narrative and change and influencing that culture of activity. I think you alluded to it a little bit with the middle schoolers, of saying that they're just like, we're doing this. Are you starting to see more of those bike racks being full at the schools on non-bike bus days? Because that's when you really start to realize that, oh yeah, no, we got this. Just like your parent that you saw who was riding by herself, even though she, 3 weeks earlier was like, no, I can't do this. Are you starting to see that transformation and starting to see more people riding and walking more often to meaningful destinations?
Yes. So we have over the last, so we've been doing Bike Bus for 2 years, and we have seen a dramatic cultural change in this town. So a few different indicators of that. One is I do see at schools the bike racks being full, which is great. On just an average Wednesday, there's more bikes. Definitely, it's not like a bike bus day, but I see more. Actually, in high school, I've been seeing more bikes on the bike racks, and I can't help but think that there is some sort of butterfly effect that is happening where, there is just this like cultural change, or even maybe it's parents feeling like, oh, it's okay to let my high school kid ride their bike who's been asking me for a while. And then we have, as I mentioned earlier, we have a train system, and a lot of adults take the train to go to work in the city, in New York City. And we all of us bike bus leaders keep on saying, like, doesn't it look like the bike racks are more full at the trains? And they definitely are. Another thing that has happened is, we really want a bike sharing program here. And somebody just created this, they call it the Gorilla Bike Share. And they started leaving bikes all around town with this QR code. And, you can check out the bike. So we've seen all of those. Like on an average Saturday, if I'm driving or walking or biking, I see more parents with their kids going to the grocery store, and just examples like that. So we see it a lot more on my street. I just live on this small street, and there's these two families that now I just see all the time, bikes going up and down my street. And I feel kind of selfish because I'm like, oh, that's all I want. That's all I want is just to see people biking around. That makes me feel good, but I know it's not selfish because it's good for everybody.
Well, you should feel proud about that, and I do like to point out that humans are a herding species, and they very much see, oh my gosh, it's, look at this image. I mean, this image that we have on screen here for folks listening to this is just a classic shot of the bike bus, and it's fun. And when people see other people out doing stuff and they're having fun, and it's vibrant, and it's something that's like, oh, I want to do that too. And you mentioned it earlier, is that the kids bring the parents along. They'll put
Yes.
pressure on the parents to say, no, I want to do that. I want my own bike bus shirt, and so they put that pressure on. To close us out, what one bit of advice would you have for a community around the globe? They're going to be folks are tuning in from around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to get a bike bus started, what's the first step in getting a bike bus started in your estimation?
I honestly think the first step is slightly different for every community. So there's three ideas that I'd like to put out there. One is find your community. So find the other people that care about this, that are going to be the early adopters, link up with them. The second thing is bring the joy. So, the music, the t-shirts, the like optimism, the fun, all of that really matters. And to your point, it gets people to join and to want to be a part of this. And then the third thing I always say is just do it. Like, do not wait for permission. Do not ask. Like, just do it. And do it every Friday or do it every Wednesday, whatever it is that works. Just keep on doing it.
I love it. I love it. Jessica, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much.
It's been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Jessica. And if you did, please, hey, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on the subscription button down below and be sure to remember to ring that notifications bell. And if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. It's super easy to do. Just navigate over to activetowns.org and click on the support tab at the top of the page. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. It really means so much to me. And until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, sending a huge thank you out to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Thanks, as well as making contributions to the nonprofit. Every little bit adds up and it's much appreciated. Thank you all so much.